This is Antic, the Atari podcast.
You know, the APX experience was an interesting experience. I think it was a really interesting precursor of the models that we're seeing today.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Richard Lindgren published two programs in Atari Program Exchange. Real Estate Cash Flow Analysis first appeared in the Winter 1983 APX catalog, where it won first prize in the Business and Professional Applications category. Strategic Financial Ratio Analysis was first available in the Summer 1983 catalog, where it took second prize in the Home Management category. Real Estate Cash Flow Analysis is described as consisting of three sections to assist both new and professional investors in analyzing the costs and benefits of income-producing property. It cost $22.95, was available on diskette only, and was APX catalog number 20169. The catalog entry for Strategic Financial Ratio Analysis says you supply information from published financial statements such as annual reports. Strategic Financial Ratio Analysis computes ratios that measure a firm's profitability, liquidity, and use of debt. You can also use the program to interpret a management's business strategies, not always evident from looking at the numbers alone. That program was also available on diskette only, cost $24.95, and was APX catalog number 20217. Richard also wrote the program Banjo Picker, which appeared in the October 1985 issue of Antic magazine. Program your Atari to make sounds like an automated 5-string banjo, and which we're listening to right now. This interview took place February 8, 2016. Can you get me started by telling me how you got interested in computers and how you found the Atari machine and kind of the prehistory, please?
Yes, my undergrad degree is in computer science, and I was working in the auto industry. This goes back to 1970. I was fortunate to get into an advanced engineering group that was doing computer graphics, and this is in the days of the wireframe green screen type. If you recall the first Star Wars movie where they do the Death Star in a green wireframe rotation, that was kind of the state of the art that was used a lot in the auto industry to design parts and tools and plants and things like that. And that's where I was doing that for a number of years, and that's really where I cut my teeth in computers. And I had moved, decided to get out of the auto industry, and I was teaching in a small school in Iowa. And along the way, I'd picked up a graduate degree in finance to go with the undergraduate in computer science. So I was teaching both. And I was looking for a machine that had a little more graphics capability than the Apple II did, and yet was affordable. And so the Atari 800 seemed to be the best thing available at that time. I was interested in seeing what I could replicate in the graphics side. So that was my first thought: was can I replicate some of the graphics things that I had been doing? And that didn't turn into any commercial products, but at the same time, I had a couple models I was working with, and the spreadsheets were really rudimentary. This is pre-VisiCalc days, and so spreadsheets were really mainframe concoctions at that time. VisiCalc is coming in, and the other ones after that. But I had a couple of models that I had used personally, one with real estate analysis and cash flows to determine whether a rental property can make its cash flows before and after taxes. And the other one was comparing companies for strategic ratios, trying to determine from a certain set of ratios if they're profitable, why they're profitable. If they're not, why they're not. And so those are the two programs I submitted to APX, and both accepted and both won prizes, I believe.
Right. Let's see. The real estate cash flow analysis won first prize in the Business and Professional Applications category in Winter 1983, and then Strategic Financial Ratio Analysis was took second prize in the Home Management category. So, yep, you're 2 for 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was, and of course at that time there wasn't a lot of software available, and so they sold pretty well. It was actually a very nice supplement to income, and I don't think people had a lot of choices. And even APX, I think the prizes were largely in the form of in kind, and so you got a catalog of Atari items and APX software and such, and had your pick up to a certain dollar value. And so I had kind of one of everything of Atari by the time I was through with that project.
Nice. So, I mean, were you doing real estate stuff yourself, or was it just that you had the knowledge from school from it, or were you using these programs in your own life? I guess that's my question.
The real estate was something I was interested in and had done some graduate work in evaluation from a more professional point of view, looking at rental properties. And I had some friends who were interested in that area. So that's really where that came about. The ratio analysis was actually a side consulting thing I was doing. I had contacts in the computer graphics industry from my time with the auto industry, and at that time, most of the computer graphics companies were small startups, and they were always asking, how am I doing relative to the competition? What are these small startup competitors doing? And then some of the bigger companies were looking at acquisitions, and so I was actually able to derive a pretty good income from digging out information. And this is, of course, in pre-internet times, at least commercial internet, and you could not get easily a lot of this financial information. So a lot of it was digging through various sources to get financial information on startup companies, compile it together, make comparisons of different companies. So that was really the professional side where I spent most of my time, was using something similar to the real estate analysis program, actually using that Atari program to print out and do some reports. So it worked out pretty well.
Nice. So you were using your own program to do consulting work, sounds like.
Yeah, it worked well. It was a little niche that was profitable for a while, and about the time that Atari started running into trouble, about that same time there was this mass of acquisitions, and a lot of my clients just got snapped up by larger companies, and so a lot of that went away about the same time. So both those opportunities went away, and I was able actually, though, to use my experience working on that software to go with an educational publisher that was moving into educational software. And so I spent quite a few years with them, going in as an editor and then later becoming the head of technology development for the publishing company. And so yeah, the Atari gave me that kind of leverage to move and take my experience into a different area. And I eventually wound up back in teaching, but that was a very good start of a good career for me.
Nice. Do you have a sense of how well each of them sold, or which one was more popular, or any sort of data on which of your two programs was the winner?
It's going back quite a ways. I think the real estate one, as I recall, I think it came out first, and so it had more time there in the market, and so it did pretty well. And I don't remember the numbers. I don't know that we ever really saw numbers, other you could derive them from royalties. So I don't recall what those were, but it was a nice additional check into the budget. But I think accounting was a little mysterious at that point anyway.
Right. So the October 1985 issue of Antic magazine, you had your program Banjo Picker published. I'd like to know about that. Did you play the banjo, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that was just a fun thing I was doing. Another, the thing about the Atari, it had the interesting the music simulators in there, and I played guitar for a long time. I actually play left-handed, and you can't find left-handed banjos. I was able to build one using a custom neck. Everything's kind of reversed, mirror image, and so I picked that pretty quickly. And in banjo, there's the one hand is doing usually a fairly standard set that you learn of runs of strings, and then the other hand is fingering the chords. And I realized that you could kind of put those together pretty quickly. Now you had to really kind of get into the depths of the machine, though, because you had to both poke at the music processors. You had 4 processors. I think you reminded me of that, and 5 strings that you had to deal with. So I figured out an algorithm that could make it sound like all 5 strings were going, even by gradually reducing each string down by a little bit. And so, at least to your hearing, it sounded like all 5 of them were going. And then I had to poke into the keyboard to be able to turn certain keys into chord structures and fingering structures. So if you poked around with the keyboard a little bit, you could actually play some pretty serviceable songs. You could speed up, slow down, do that type of thing. So that was a fun thing that got me. That's the one that probably got me deeper into the internals of the Atari 800 than anything else.
Did you write any other programs that were published or unpublished? Any other articles, anything like that?
In terms of the Atari, that was really it. I had published a number of articles in the trade press for computer graphics trade press related to information on ratio analysis and comparing the companies, and so that pulled out some more consulting jobs out of that as well. So that all kind of grew from that. Try to find an easier way to do that kind of analysis, and the Atari was just kind of the right machine at the right time for that. It worked pretty well.
Nice. What do you do today?
After I left teaching to go into educational publishing, I was there quite a while, and then went to Europe with them when the Euro was coming in to help some company. They had a number of subsidiary companies that were trying to get the Euro going, and so I was on a team that worked on that for a while. Lived in Europe for a couple of years, and then coming back, I decided had had enough of a lot of travel. I was just constantly on the road with that, and so I went back to teaching and retired from that, and so now I'm retired.
Nice. I'm wondering if you ever got any feedback from users of your products. Do you made them $1 million, or they lost everything, or they blamed you? I don't know, or just bug reports or anything.
The real estate, I did get some feedback from people who were really trying to manage rental properties and got some very complimentary things on that product. I think that's why I think that one sold the most, and so people were actually able to use it to evaluate, say, if they wanted to buy an apartment house or some other properties for rental, and so it laid out both what happens. You put in your tax rates and your assumption of how expenses were going to go, and by again, before spreadsheets were really widely available, it was a real easy way to test out how much I should pay for property. So I did get some feedback from some people that were pleased and used it to run their businesses. So I think that was satisfying.
Nice. Is there anything else Atari related that we should talk about that we haven't?
The APX experience was an interesting experience. I think you've had some of your other interviewees talk about this as well, but I think it was a really interesting precursor of the models that we're seeing today. It was largely user-driven. I was never quite sure of how deep Atari got into it and how closely they were managing it, but it seemed to have a certain independence to it. Had a certain tie to the user community, and there was some correspondence with some of the other users. I remember talking to some other programmers in the APX exchange, the APX group, trading information back and forth about how to do certain things, and so there was just people who opened themselves up as a self-help kind of community. There wasn't a lot of documentation available, and so people had to figure out do things in creative ways. And so some interesting software came out of that. There, some things I think had legs to it and showed up in other ways down the road. And I learned a couple of languages. I learned Forth in one project that never did make it out, but Forth was a language that someone had put out a compiler. I don't know if you're familiar with that language, but it's a fascinating language that would run really well on a really small computer.
Yeah, I only know a little bit about it. Haven't dabbled with it myself, but
yeah, it basically treated the Atari as one big push-down stack, and in computer science terms, and so very, very efficient in terms of how it handled things. And so it was kind of in between the assembler language and BASIC. It was faster than BASIC and slower than assembler. So if you didn't want to actually get down into the pushing the bytes around, you could write a pretty serviceable program using Forth. But I think it was hard to deliver, as I recall, into a commercial environment. So it didn't go very far. But there weren't a lot of tools available at that time to write to that small machine. And a lot of that came out of my computer background with the auto industry. We were trying to do things in computer graphics on some machines that were not particularly big from our point of view. They're tiny. We're talking about 32 kilobytes, of memory, and so all those things you learn about how to do math in a really, really tiny environment. You had to use on the Atari as well.
Yeah, awesome.
But it was a great machine. I always liked the machine. I was sad to see kind of the company go in a different direction, and things didn't go well for the company. But it was a fascinating machine to work on. I held on to it for a long time, well after it was past its market. At least from I wasn't in the game market, and so it kind of lost its use to people outside of that market, and the company took a different direction. So it was an interesting hardware setup, of course, with the graphics and the sound that the Apple II didn't have, and I thought it had an interesting niche.
Yes, it did. Well, great. I think I have what I need. Thank you, Richard.
Great. Well, thank you for getting in touch with me, and I hope the podcast continues to do well.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.